this is going to be more of a talk about, well, let's see here. Similarly to the last one, we actually have this up on a community discussion, and there's a QR code there that can take you to that. But really, this is talking about kind of FVM and Filecoin in the kind of the role of the wider Web3 sort of world and ecosystem. So, how does Filecoin, how does FVM compare for dApp developers, in terms of things like block time, finality, gas fees, about things like decentralisation, permissionless. We seem to be, well, I think we've already covered a little bit of this in the previous discussion area where we're talking about, hey, this is great, we've got all this decentralised kind of stuff, and then we're interfacing with the cold, hard world of, regulatory side of things that is not. How are we doing in terms of things like a lot of the onboarding is going via aggregators, right? Because within Filecoin storage providers are looking to store large amounts of data, so they're aggregating smaller bits of data. Projects like Web3 storage, NFT storage, Lighthouse as well, kind of aggregating the data together. Do they become centralized gatekeepers in some way? What are the issues around that with regards to storing data? Were you about to say something there, George? Grab the mic.
Yeah, I just had a couple of other bullet points that I might like try and tack on.
Yeah, definitely.
Interesting.
This is just a starter, so
yeah, things that are important about blockchains, I guess. Maybe like the economic security of the blockchain, like how many resources would it take to attack it?
Right.
Is interesting to compare to other chains, and then also things like liquidity.
Yeah.
So I think someone mentioned stable coins earlier. Like,
yeah.
Is anyone thinking about putting a stable coin on Filecoin? And if so, I presume liquidity would be a concern there because, things like Ethereum probably have more liquidity on them. So there are a couple more dimensions to think about.
Yeah, indeed. And I think things like, for example, bridges between, can help with that. One of the issues then there as we hit into things like finality issues. So within Filecoin, the finality is generally accepted to be around 7 hours. So if you've got a bridge, then a bridge is moving a token from one blockchain to Filecoin, or from Filecoin to another blockchain. You end up having to wait for the finality to kind of go through before you can release the funds there. It was interesting if anyone was in any of the IPC talks. There was a lot there yesterday about how IPC might be helping with this. Because whilst IPC would have that same issue getting the funds onto IPC, once they're onto an IPC subnet, you've then got potentially much faster finality. There's also a project called Granite as well. I actually don't know a huge amount about it. I only found out about it just a few days ago. I think it was revealed in Singapore for the first half of this conference, which is a system to attempt to speed up the finality on Filecoin as well. So we get a lot of developers that come to us and say, block times are too slow, because I've got to wait 90 seconds for a transaction to go through. Why would I build on Filecoin when I could use a layer 2 of Ethereum, like Polygon or Optimism or something like that might go a lot faster, be a lot cheaper. The main thing is FVM, we've got the integration with the storage, but at the moment that is in a state that could be improved considerably and hopefully will be. So yeah, has anybody else got any kind of sort of thoughts on this, or got a thinning out room? So yeah, I mean, what I'm hoping is, so we've been working on some standards called RAS, which stands for Replication as a Service, Redundancy as a Service, and we're hoping those will be a sort of set of standards that aggregators can work with, that would make it easier for them to integrate in, with the kind of Web3 world. I know. Yeah,
and I'm curious about how FVM and IPC are going to work together, how the user experience for deploying subnets is going to be, together with the tooling for FVM and deploying smart contracts, and
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. Yesterday there were some IPC talks and there was some discussion about that. They've been reworking the way in which you actually deploy subnets on IPC because it's not been very easy at the moment. but they have a new CLI tool. And I think they said that was being released like imminently, I think, that allows much easier construction of subnets from IPC. The thing being is those subnets then hit into a lot of the same issues that George just mentioned with regards to things like liquidity, with regards to things like, you know, economic, strength on the network. If I want to spin up a subnet, I'm also responsible for deploying the nodes on that subnet. So if I deploy a subnet and just run, you know, a couple of nodes in my basement kind of thing, that's obviously a lot less economically secure than a network that is distributed, you know, in a wider fashion with a lot more economic weight anchoring it. So, yeah, that is a thing. But that's something that's we're gonna have to look at. So FVM is going to be a part of that. So FVM will be a blockchain on that. And there's a project. There was a thing that was proposed in one of the talks by Raul Kapani in Singapore about a FVM runtime called Yellow. And I don't know, Ison, if you're able to explain Yellow. From my understanding, it's basically allows you to kind of deploy a network and configure the parameters much easier for like what runtimes you might have on there, whether it's FVM or WASM. Is that?
Yeah, I think your summary is the right way at this stage to describe, because it's still early for us to definitely mention. But yes, it's gonna allow like modular runtimes, different runtimes being deployed, and connections with IPC. But this week is part of like our this technical discussions, the track that we had earlier this week, yesterday on Monday. So I would say, too early to go into more details, but probably in a few weeks' time we will have more to share, and then more so publicly.
Yes.
Are you hearing a lot of feedback from developers about gas costs being a big issue, or?
Block times more than gas costs. So gas costs. So I did a comparison just recently. I took a standard Open Zeppelin ERC20 contract, deployed it on Ethereum. It was at the time it was about $40 to deploy on Ethereum. It was about $20 to deploy on Arbitrum, I believe it was, as layer 2, which seemed quite high for layer 2. It was about 80 cents to deploy on Filecoin. Both mainnet and calibration net, testnet coming out about the same, about 80 cents. And then deploying it on Polygon was about 8 cents, right? And then similarly to interact with it, I mean, actually interacting with the contract on Polygon to actually mint the tokens was coming at, you know, less than 2 decimal places. It was actually showing up as 0.00 in MetaMask. I think it was 0.008 or something like that. But it was, you know, that was quite interesting that it was actually small enough that, according to, at least when you look at it in MetaMask, it appears to be free, right? It's not quite, but you know, that was quite interesting. So, and I can't remember what the fees were for Filecoin in that regards, but we're definitely on the cheaper end. Now, different blockchains account in different ways. So certain blockchains might have a higher fee for like storage, like memory versus compute, and vice versa. So different workloads might cost different amounts, but we seem to be reasonably good on gas costs.
I suppose that's probably dominated by the value of the token more than like technological things.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yes. That's fair point there. Token.
But I mean, if that goes up to the moon, then it'll become more of a concern.
It's a nice problem to have then.
Yeah.
Exactly. Indeed. And you know, I think like I said, gas costs are, I think, less of an issue than block times that we've been seeing. You know, one of the issues that we do have, we end up in a bit of a catch-22 situation with when developers deploy. There's a couple of issues, and I've talked about this in some previous talks, but two sort of friction areas we have at the moment. One is exchanges supporting the F4 address scheme. So if you were trying to get funds into a smart contract on FVM, you know, Coinbase just about a week or so ago has finally supported it, but Binance, for example, still doesn't. Most of the other large exchanges don't. So it's actually a bit of a hassle trying to get funds from them onto smart contracts. You've got to go generally via burner wallet first to an F1 address, and then from an F1 address to an F4 address. So that's a bit of a pain, but there were some talks earlier, technical talks about how we're going to hopefully make it easier for exchanges to fix that. We can't fix it for them, but we can try and make it easier for them. Then the other issue we have is with regards to storage providers. If you're trying to test something that involves storage and you're trying to test it on the calibration testnet, there's only a limited number of storage providers on there, and only one really that we've been working with directly that is incentivized to actually take the storage deals. Because one of the big problems being is on Filecoin, storage providers are incentivized using the fill token, and on testnet, it's tfill, testfill, which has zero value. So they've got all real-world electricity costs, real-world server costs, and hardware costs, and staff costs, but they're incentivized with Mickey Mouse money. So it doesn't, that's why there's not a huge amount of storage providers on testnet, which then means it's quite difficult for developers to then actually test against that. So, yeah. Cool. Any other questions or thoughts on kind of Web3 stuff on here?
I did. Sorry, I'm asking a lot of questions.
Yeah,
and
go
stuff,
for it.
but I don't know who's the best person to answer this question, and maybe it's a naive one. But now that we have full Solidity support, FVM, what do you think the main drivers are? The main advantages for people to consider other like runtimes or writing native WASM actors? Is that about better gas costs or just kind of nice dev experience with different languages? Why would people want to rewrite their stuff in a different language or a different runtime?
Yeah, in some cases I think it's around developer experience. Solidity's not necessarily the nicest language to use, especially if you used a more fully featured, more regular languages, and if you could write this in Rust and compile down to WASM, which is a route that a lot of systems take, then that would probably be easier for you. Conversely, there's a lot of mindshare behind Solidity, so all the tooling is there for Solidity, so the debuggers and all of that lot exist, which makes that a lot easier. So in bringing other runtimes, we've got to also fabricate the tooling as well for developers to use. So that's a big, yeah.
We have already developed an assembly script SDK with some tooling around, and it's there, just waiting this right time for WASM. But yeah, it's very similar to TypeScript, and there might be some developers that will find that easier to onboard.
Yeah, one of the advantages with the WASM side is one, potentially gas costs. If you're trying to tune every last autofill or whatever out of the gas costs, then that will certainly help with that regards. So yeah. Cool.
Yeah, just thinking through it, the unique thing that's enabled by FVM is the storage,
right?
And that is not where we want it to be yet, but it will be there soon. But if you think of like what has users today on blockchain networks, it's trading of tokens, speculation, and it's DeFi, right?
Right.
And who in our ecosystem like actually needs DeFi? Probably storage providers, and they might like jump through hoops to use it, right? So to me, that feels like a low-hanging fruit use case for like the FVM is storage providers, which then once they're all integrated under, I don't know, some sort of lending platform, then you can layer on the, ability to feed in these storage deals into that ecosystem because you have them all in one place. But it feels like, I don't know, that feels to me like the most obvious use case right now based on like what we know that's already working, because it doesn't feel like clients of these storage providers have like any interest of interacting with or using crypto networks today.